Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Ju. I'm from the University of Toronto. I'm a neuroscientist and I wanted to share a little bit with you today about the brain, behavior, and how we know that different molecules change the behavior through the release of different types of neurochemicals. So this is what I study. I study this structure down here, which is known as the brain, and many of you will have heard of this molecule up here at the top, which is called dopamine, and this idea that changes in dopamine can impact this structure, the brain, to cause changes in your behavior are as easy as trying to understand why you eat certain types of foods that you eat, as well as how you do your shopping. So one of those things that dopamine influences is this behavior which is known as contrast novelty or dynamic contrast novelty. So anything that you see that is new and different, or that tastes a little bit different, or that gives you sort of a difference in the taste that you normally would be experiencing, releases a little bit of dopamine, and that's enough for you to change your behavior. How do we know all of this? Well, let me share an experiment that was done in the 1990s by a group of individuals in the United States where they started to use a model where they gave rats unlimited access to high fat containing diets. And along the way, they saw that over the course of about 2 weeks, that they were able to see two different groups of rats start to appear, even though they all had access to this high-fat diet and unlimited amounts to it. One group of rats actually started to become obese and overweight because they continually ate and did not stop eating. And then this other group of rats actually became about the same weight. They didn't really change. And it was really interesting for these researchers to see this group of self-controlled rats versus the ones that became overweight in response to this high-fat diet. They wanted to know this behavior that they were observing. Eating is a behavior. Could they change it in any way? And is dopamine important in that process? And the way that they undertook this was to make use of the fact that using a difference, a contrast, or something new in their food would maybe trigger an increased release in dopamine and ultimately lead to a change in their behavior. And all they did was one really simple thing. They kept the amount of fat the same and they gave them unlimited access to it, but now to the food pellets they gave more sugar. And so this high fat and high sugar diet that both groups were exposed to, the group that had had this self-control before, they now started overeating and they also became obese. They lacked that self-control. And all it took was adding something new into the food that they were eating that they hadn't experienced before. And this idea that dynamic contrast novelty, something new in the environment, causing a release in dopamine to cause a change in behavior, is one that we now know is established and is so important in controlling our everyday lives, whether you're a neuroscientist or you're just someone who is interested in neuroscience, the brain, as well as in behavior. How do we know that this all occurs? Well, think a little bit about this. So, do you really like Oreo cookies? There's a good reason why Oreo cookies are designed in the way that they are. So they have a fatty substance, they have a little bit of a bitter wafer of a cookie, and that change, that dynamic difference is enough to release more dopamine than you would normally have with a plain old cookie, and this is what makes you want to eat more of these Oreo cookies. Additionally, you may already have an iPhone 11 and you may already know that you don't need an upgrade, but by seeing that the new iPhone 12 Pro is just a little bit different, might be a little bit lighter or a new color, that difference that we see there is causing that tiny little burst of dopamine to actually cause you to potentially change your behavior, that behavior being shopping or buying. We all know that dopamine plays an important role, and by blocking these dopaminergic effects or by blocking dopamine release, we can actually curtail or stop these behaviors. So that is neuroscience in 5 minutes. I hope that wherever you're at, you are going to be keeping that in mind, and you'll always remember that dopamine, dynamic novelty contrast, can change your brain as well as change behavior. You're going to have to come back and see if I've eaten all of these cookies or not. All right, see you everyone.